Good afternoon, Chairman. We're right at 12:59. We're still waiting for other commissioners to join. Currently, you have Commissioner Van Gostry, Commissioner Strickland, Commissioner Council on the line. So we're still waiting for some others.
Fantastic. Let's wait a few minutes.
Okay. Anita, is Commissioner Talafero on the line that you know of?
Commissioner Talafero has not called in yet.
Okay.
Hello?
We're here. We'll wait a minute to get started.
Yeah. You are not allowed to call me. Hang up. Goodbye.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Hello? Hello?
Yes.
So do we have a quorum of board members?
Yes, we do. We're still waiting on a couple, but you do have a quorum if you want to go ahead and get started.
Yes, I'd like to go ahead and get started if that's okay with you, Ms. McNair.
It is, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
So gracious of you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil Albert. I am the chairman of the Board of Commissioners. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is our regular monthly meeting of the DC Housing Authority, which is being held today, June 9, 2021. This meeting is being held via WebEx video conference, and the time is 1:04 p.m. I'm going to remind you that if you're not speaking, please ensure that you place your devices on mute. I want to thank you in advance for that. And as is our custom, I'm going to ask that we observe a moment of silence before going into agenda. Thank you. So as I said earlier, this is our our regular board meeting. On today's agenda, we've invited members of the public to sign up and speak via our website. But you can also follow us live on Facebook Live. Every board meeting, I remind folks of the need for sort of the proper decorum so that we can be respectful to both the board members and the audience, and particularly the public engagement portion of our meeting. So I'm going to ask you to do that again. At this time, I'm going to ask Ms. McNear to do a roll call to determine for a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Bessie Reeder. Thank you. Commissioner Council.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Falchecchio.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Ortiz-Gow.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Slover.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Strickland.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Talaferro.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Van Gossry.
Present.
Thank you. And Chairman Albert.
Present.
Thank you. Chairman, you have 10 commissioners present. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Ms. McNear. I would like the commissioners to, at this time, consider the minutes of the May 12, 2021 board meeting and the May 27, 2021 emergency board meeting. Are there any comments or changes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the May 12th and 27th board meetings?
Motion.
It's motion and
Second.
seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. The minutes of our meeting are approved. Next on our agenda, I am going to ask is the executive director's report. I think I saw Mr. Garrett on a little earlier. Mr. Garrett, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners and members of the public. Can you hear me okay? So I'm away from the mic. Okay, Natasha's going to throw up. I'm going to skip over this thing pretty quickly, Mr. Chair. But I just wanted to point out for the director's report today, I wanted to just point out the performance measures that we were given, or that I was given in October of last year, and just let you know where we stand to date. So the components of the performance measures were COVID response, and this was given to me by the performance committee from the Board of Commissioners, the subcommittee. So it was COVID response, advanced development opportunities here in the district with the Housing Authority, to improve communications and stakeholder engagement, and to create greater operational efficiencies. So Natasha, if you just go to, right, okay, cool. And so from that standpoint, what we needed to do with performance was to make sure that we effectively led our COVID vaccination effort within the agency. And I believe we did that. And Natasha, you can run through the slides. I'll tell you, just go to the next one. Keep going. Okay, this is one that's important, commissioners. It's the use of the CARES Act money to help sustain not only our properties, but also sustain the workforce at the same time. So you can see how that money was actually utilized to date. I believe we still have some funding remaining in the CARES Act budget allocation that needs to be utilized before the end of September. And so this whole entire presentation, again, as always, will be uploaded so you can see it. But again, this is in direct response to the performance measures that you gave to me last October. And so this is where we are with the COVID numbers in terms of CARES Act money. In terms of the workforce, the one thing that tells exactly how well we did in terms of creating an environment that was safe, not only for employees, but also for our residents, is this tracker right here. where you can see, unfortunately, though, we did have one individual who did pass away as an employee from COVID. But the one thing I can say based on this tracker and based on this chart, what you actually see, commissioners, is that none of the individuals, there wasn't an outbreak at the office or within the workspace. All of these individuals contracted COVID outside of the workplace. So that's important to note that we did our best to contain it. Even though the pandemic was a serious issue, I think we did very well as a workforce, as a team, to curtail it. In addition, at the properties, you know that we did not have a serious outbreak at any of our properties, especially at the senior buildings, based on the steps that we took to curtail visitors and also our cleaning efforts at the sites at the same time. So I think it's important to note that we were successful in our attempt to deal with the pandemic and with COVID. Go to B, Natasha, please. Managed capital projects. Next slide. The one goal for me was to try and advance as many development projects as I possibly could. And to that point, we have been successful, at least to date, to be able to have 3 RAD transactions at least brought to your attention: Judiciary, Melville, and Potomac Gardens today. I was also able to sign all of the pertinent documents for the Kenilworth redevelopment project to close on its first phase. So that's moving forward, along with receiving the demolition application approvals for both Park Morton and also Sursum Turnkey Sibley. Those were important because those had not been submitted prior to my arrival. And the last component on this particular slide, which just talks about how we were starting to create a pipeline and create energy for particular redevelopment projects in the coming years. And so you'll see where Sursum Turnkey has an RFQ that went out to the public for a development partner. Langston is going through the process of the master planning component with public comment right now. And also Arthur Capper. Langston is creating a master plan. We have a RFQ out for master planning. And then for Arthur Capper master plan, we have that out for public review. Okay, you can go to C, Natasha. Improve stakeholder communications. Next slide. We did pick up our pace in terms of engaging the residents, advocates, and the ANCs and other district agencies. But Natasha, go to the next one. The big bullet point for this one next would be a snapshot of all our resident engagements. And I think we totaled in essence, since October, about 42. We totaled about 42 resident engagements that are on YouTube, that you can go back and look at those particular meeting interactions with the residents in reference to RAD and or any other redevelopment initiative that we were taking on. So that was important because that was a great leap from where we were prior to October to now. 42 YouTubes, along with other avenues for engagement with the public and also with the residents in regards to moving this along. Okay, Natasha, go to D. Okay. Identifying opportunities for greater efficiencies within the organization. One of the biggest pieces was we had a deficit, and you charged me with identifying a way to bring that deficit down on an annual basis by no later than fiscal year 23. And in fact, we're on track to do that. We're going to probably have another reduction of about $2.6 million this year. So that gets us one step closer to having a fully balanced budget in the coming years, along with in doing that. What's also going to take place is we're doing our evaluation, and we have completed that analysis of the rent calculations or the rent process for the Housing Choice Voucher program. And it's going to be implemented, hopefully, if all things follow through, roughly around January of 2022. And that should also take some relief off of our budget and allow us to move a little more freely in some of the things that you would like to do in the future. Contracts and procurement, I think, in having a conversation with Commissioner Strickland, he talked about how we had actually started to engage more actively and proactively local businesses, small SBEs, minority businesses within the district, and that was something that I really tried to promote as strong as I could possibly do, and it was carried out by Lori Bonds and her team, along with engagement from OCP, because they were put on on the spot because I really wanted them to move with more opportunities locally. And that's something that I believe that we're been able to do, especially with the district dollars to date. And remember, we still have time to go at 69% of utilization of CBEs for district-owned businesses with the transformation plan funds. The one thing that we want to point out is that we haven't finished the year. Remember, this is just a snapshot from October to date. We still have approximately about three more months to go where that number could actually, that percentage could
Let me
actually.
call you back when I get off this web next.
Okay. Natasha, next. And let's just hit the last, in organizational efficiency, everyone, I think commissioners, you know all about that. You know what we've been doing to create opportunities with the workforce for training. We took time during COVID to do that, definitely, to have individuals sit for different exams. We use apps, we use dashboards, we use all sorts of things to enhance our progress here at the organization. One thing I did forget during the capital program component, which was one of the drivers, was that we needed to create that dashboard for you, and that has been completed. And you have the access to be able to log in and get real-time information on various redevelopment projects. That was something else that you asked me to do through the capital programs department. Keep going, Natasha. Just go, you know what, Natasha, they've seen the dashboards, they've seen all of this. Public safety, you know, we've done miraculously getting the camera system to work. That was something else that you wanted me to concentrate on. Was public safety, which we did take that very seriously. And you know the camera system is working and it has helped OPS a great deal. And then the last slide, Natasha. Okay. The very, very last. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, you know, we were working with ATP and we were trying our best to get those individuals to participate either with ATP to participate and find job opportunities, whether it be with another training cohort through the Carpenters Union or maybe possibly an opportunity with DCHA or another district agency who had jobs. There was also another thought process that I had. And when we were going through this, remember last month we did the resident-owned business component where we offered the grants and the coaching for resident-owned businesses within our sphere. That was something that I wanted us to do, and we were able to be successful with that. And hopefully in the coming years, you'll be able to expand that. But there was one other piece that I really wanted to make sure that I tried to get off the ground before I left, and that was the resident-owned business established pursuant to HUD regs, where we're going to take 11 of our ATP graduates, and we're going to create a cohort, a company cohort, basically. We're going to create a business model for them along with OGC assisting them and maybe possibly outside counsel for coaching and setup. But these 11 individuals are going to be working with us on a temporary basis for the next 3 months. After they finish that temporary work, they're going to have their own entrepreneurial, their own business that they're going to be able to identify, and we're going to identify a contract opportunity for them to do the make unit turnaround for PMO and or OCP, where they're not contractors already in place. This is provided by regulation within HUD, which says we can do that for a resident-owned business through procurement, through a lesser procurement criteria. So what's going to actually happen, commissioners, that you're going to be able to have one of the first in the nation resident-owned businesses that are actually going to work on projects within the housing, within your housing authority by turning around units. So the goal is to have that completed no later than September and have them engaged as a company no later than October. So that was a brief synopsis of the presentation. I'm sure that Alethea will be able to upload it to Diligent. Again, the point of doing this was just to show you that where we were in terms of our performance measures that you offered to me in October, where we are today. So with that, unless there are any specific questions, I'm going to ask Mr. Chair that you allow me to be excused.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garrett. Thanks for the presentation and the information. Alethea, if you can make sure it's emailed to all the board members and placed on our website, I would appreciate that. And yes, Mr. Garrett, you're excused. Thank you so much for your service to DCHA.
Thank you. Take care.
So it is our custom to provide residents and non-residents with the opportunity to provide testimony on the resolutions that will be discussed today. We have one person that signed up to provide that testimony. That's Ms. Deborah Fraser. So Ms. Fraser, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Muted.
We can hear you, Deborah.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. My tape doesn't allow me to have all of the resolutions, and I will save some of my questions for when you read them all complete. My questions are around, I believe there's a resolution for architects and contractors for the RAD projects. So hopefully your response will include answers to these questions. One, are the architects and contractors already chosen? And if so, were they chosen by competitive bidding? Two, what's the amount of the bid? Is it per RAD, or is it only for RAD? Are they being contracted only for the RAD properties? Or is there a contractor for each RAD? What's the dollar amount for each one? And what is the duration of the contract? How long do they have specific goals to accomplish, and how long will those be? And also for clarity for all of us, can you say what the Melvo properties include? That's it.
Thank you so much, Deborah. We'll have those responses during the presentation. Thanks as always.
Okay.
Great. So we'll move on to our resolutions. The first resolution is Resolution 2106, which will authorize the execution of contracts for professional architectural and engineering services. Thor Nelson from DCHA will provide a quick overview of the resolution. And Thor, I hope you can answer the questions that Ms. Fraser raised also.
Certainly. 1 second while I load up my presentation. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to present Resolution 2106 for your review. This resolution will approve a new bench of architectural and service contractors to provide a variety of architectural services for the rehabilitation of projects and the modernization of public housing. I'm going to go over 3 basic parts today. First, I want to talk a little bit about why we need IDIQ and why it's contracting and why it's an essential part of modern public agency construction delivery. Second, I'll go over how we selected these AE contractors and how we prepared the solicitation and how it was scored. And then finally, I'll review the recommendations and the awardees that we're putting forth for your approval. First, why do we need an architectural and services IDIQ? IDIQ stands for indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. We're giving a contract to somebody without a specified nature of what the actual work will be in the future or how long it will occur for. And so we create what are called task orders when we want to ask these contractors to do work for us. Our current IDIQ contract has expired last fall. As we prepared to create a new IDIQ contract, we realized that we had a dramatically different need for AE services coming up in the next 3 years. We anticipate that the authority will be doing over $300 million in rehabilitation construction, which would generate over $20 million in AE design contracts. And this is going to require an IDIQ bench that had more robust contracting authority to be able to deliver these projects quickly. Finally,
excuse me, somebody is unmuted. Thank you.
Sure. Additionally, we realized that many of these contracts would be close to $1 million in fees. And so we needed a vehicle which allowed for that flexibility. We looked to several best practices. We looked at both the districts IDIQ contracting solicitations, as well as GSAs, federal IDIQ contracting procedures. So what you're going to see today was modeled on those two procedures, both the scope of the services that we asked for and the contract amounts that are in district and federal IDIQ benches for AE design services. So I'm going to go over a little bit now, what work are we anticipating happening? Like, what will these contractors be doing? First, in next year, we anticipate a host of master planning and feasibility studies to gear projects up for developing pro formas, architectural feasibility studies to understand the scope of rehabilitation work that's needed. And then we'll be moving forward with actual AE design contracts for several projects: Claridge Apartments, Potomac Senior and Family, and James Creek. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the way AE and construction projects are bid, typically an architect is hired to prepare a set of drawings, and then those are put out for public bid for contractors to work on. That's called design, bid, build. That's the method we'll be using with these AE contractors. There are also other methods of contract delivery where a contractor and architecture come together and present a bid. That's not what this work would be facilitating. We anticipate 9 to 10 major rehabilitation projects in the next 3 to 5 years that this bench would service. So we're talking about, almost all of our senior towers that are aging structures built in the 60s and 70s, and some of our family properties like Woodland Terrace, where we'll need extensive feasibility studies before we think about what is the development path forward. So as you can see, this includes, projects that will have multi-million dollars in the range of $40 to $60 million rehabilitation costs, and we'll need architectural staff to oversee both the construction and the scoping of that work. What is IDIQ? I've talked about it a little bit, but basically this is a way we can fast-track procurement. It allows us to scope a project, so understand how much it costs, what we're going to do, so that we can then put it out to bid. And this allows us to do that quickly, so we can bring on an architect to do some quick studies without having to go through a public procurement process, which could take up to 9 months. We're very mindful that we're working on the district's capital campaign, receiving funds from the district, and we have to compete with other agencies and their performance metrics to get that funding. And those other agencies use IDIQ contracting. One of the reasons we think IDIQ contracting is very effective is it creates a preset fee schedule. So we're not negotiating price with contractors. We've set it upon this contract, and then those fees will be used in the estimation of the work as part of task orders. We set this for a 3-year time period, so we can lock in this pricing over the next 3 years. And most importantly, while we have a contract award of a very large amount to allow for competitive bidding and a large volume of work, the board is in no way authorizing that level of spending for any awardee. We are only obligated to spend $50,000 for any Category A awardee, or a minimum of $10,000 for any Category B awardee. And based on the performance of these awardees in delivering these contracts, we may or may not decide to pursue additional work with an awardee beyond these amounts. What's before you is 2 basic contracts that in this RFP. One is contract A. We have 6 awardees, and this is for large rehabilitation work. We're estimating the cost of the construction will be over $5 million. So we were looking for a very strong, experienced bench of architects and engineers who had experience with multifamily construction and showed innovative design. For contract B, we were looking for smaller scale, rehabilitation and construction projects, typically maybe an interior renovation of a first floor or a floor level, and modernization work, including installing new equipment, scoping modernization for a building. These contracts have a maximum award of $900,000, and we are selecting 5 awardees. Here's just a brief list of kind of some of the basic differences between these services. Contract B has basic architectural services, whereas Contract A has these services plus additional land planning services and a full suite of AE services from pre-concept master planning all the way to construction administration. As we said, we modeled this procurement looking at federal procurement for architectural services to try to get the best response out of the architectural field. So out of our technical scoring, we gave heavy weight to the experience and technical competence of the firms over other factors. So professional qualifications and specialized experience were heavily weighted to ensure that we were getting the highest talent in this contract selection. Like all of DCHA's contracts, there's also a Section 3 component where firms had to present a Section 3 plan for hiring public housing residents as part of the delivery of their work, and they were scored upon this. And then finally, we had the fee proposal, which sets in the pricing, and additional small minority women-owned bonus points to try to ensure greater participation of small minority and women-owned businesses. So what was the result of this procurement? The procurement took about 6 months from start to finish in terms of the issue date in September of last year. And then proposals were received at the end of October. And given the number of the proposals, we received 38 overall. It required an extensive review time. And so we finalized our award recommendation on April 28th of this year. As was mentioned, we received 38 proposals, which at 21 for Category A and 17 for Category B, with about 12 submitting for both. We were very pleased with this response rate, and we received a large response from the district's architecture community due to some direct emailing of firms. We published it in local newspapers, and we worked with the local AIADC in publicizing this to the architectural community. Looking at the awardees, we picked of the firms that were selected. These are the top scoring firms, and they were all within the competitive range, which means their scores were a threshold higher than other bidders in the contract selection. We awarded 6 firms in Category A. The first firm we selected is David Baker. These are no specific order, but the first firm is an outside firm from San Francisco called David Baker Architects. They are a national leader in affordable housing design. In fact, they won a HUD Secretary's Award for design in 2019. The next 2 firms on this page are local district firms. KDG is a multidisciplinary firm that has offices in several cities and specializes in multifamily and affordable housing construction. And what you can see here is a picture of the Delta Sister Sorority project on Benning Road. Moya Design Partners, is a small women minority-owned business within the district, and one of their notable projects is Dance Place in Brooklyn, which is innovative, affordable design. I believe there's someone who is not muted, and there's an audio recording going on.
Action 1, vehicle inspection. DC residents are required to
I'll continue if it's not bothering any of the commissioners. The three remaining firms were Studios, Architecture.
Thor,
Studios,
if you can hold a second, I'm just going to ask folks, if you're not speaking, please put your devices on mute. We're getting a terrible feedback. Thank you.
The three remaining firms were Studios Architecture, Studio 27 Architecture, and Tortigalis and Partners. And all of these three firms have different types of experience in design of multifamily housing. Tortigalis has a large experience, has a deep experience in both Hope 6, choice neighborhoods, and master planning and housing redevelopment. Studio 27 has shown itself to be an innovative firm in the district designing supportive housing, both CASA up in Columbia Heights as well as the new Ward 6 family shelter. And Studios is a leading multifamily design firm in the district, which has developed many cutting-edge and award-winning housing in the district. Our category B is 5 firms, and these, while we, excuse me, all of them are small business enterprises, with AMAR Group being both the CBE as well as women minority-owned business. Just some of the highlights of the experience of these firms. Minor Feinstein Architects is a Fredericksburg, Maryland-based business, but they have extensive experience in historic rehabilitation of multifamily housing. And Tees Moran, the other new contract, is experienced in small multifamily housing, similar to a lot of our family properties in terms of work, both rehabbing existing structures and creating new ones. And then AMAR Group, as I mentioned, is a full-service firm within the district, providing construction management as well as, and they've done a number of projects with the Housing Authority in the past, including we're currently doing the design work for Melvo. Brazier is currently doing work for DCHA on Langston Additions, and AE Collective is currently doing work on Judiciary House as well as other projects in our portfolio where small AE design services have been needed. I'm just going to end on this slide of the projects that I share that we will be working on over the next few years that these architecture firms will be working on. I want to impress that having an IDIQ bench is critical for the success of our construction delivery and completing the capital work that will be receiving money from the district. And this is the portfolio of work we hope to deliver using this bench and the contracting authority it will allow. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it. And that completes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Thor, for your thorough presentation. If you can just take your presentation down. We're going to open it up for a round of questions from our commissioners. I'm going to ask our commissioners to make their questions succinct, and Thor, for you to make your responses succinct also. So let's start with Commissioner Slover. Commissioner Slover.
Can Commissioner Vargas react to her questions, being that she didn't have any questions in brown bag?
Commissioner Von Gosri, go right ahead.
I have 3 questions. First question is, how are architect engineer contracts subject to regulations, especially with DC regulations? And explain the following bonds, the bonds forms, whether or not they're incorporated in the services, which would be the bid bond, the performance bond, the payment bond, and along with warranties, because I didn't hear that discussed in brown bag. And nor did you discuss whether or not there would be any employment opportunities as journeymen, apprenticeships, other opportunities for HCVP and public housing residents, not to include whether or not this contract having union employees attached to it and minority women.
Thank you, Commissioner Thor. Please respond. Or you're on mute.
These are architectural service contracts, so they're not for construction. So there's not, the same kind of performance bonds that would be brought for a contractor. But Ms. Bonds can speak to what insurance requirements and other, protections that are required as part of the contract. In terms of Section 3, each respondent did present a Section 3 plan. I know one firm proposed having an office assistant be hired from a public housing resident be hired as an office assistant, and other firms pledged monetary commitments to scholarship funds and other impact funds for residents. In terms of union, all of these contracts will have to comply with Davis-Bacon, so they will use the local wage rate, which is commensurate with union wages. I believe I answered all your questions, but if I didn't, please let me know.
Thank you.
Lori, could you respond to the question about bonds?
Yes, again, Lori Bonds, Vice President of Administrative Services. Again, as Mr. Nelson indicated, because these are service contracts for services, and again, not the actual construction, there is not a requirement for them to actually perform or present bonds. However, they do have insurance requirements, and they are high-level insurance requirements that they have to provide with the agency as an additional insured, so that it has to be attached and included before any contract is executed.
And I believe there's one other piece Commissioner Van Gosser asked about regulations. So all architects are required to be registered within the District of Columbia, and their and drawings need to be permitted through the DCRA.
And again, in response to the request on the Section 3 commitment, all of the firms did make Section 3 commitments under Category A and B. The most notably is the fact that they're making a $1,000 donation to sponsor scholarships for every $100,000 that is spent on the contract, as well as, again, Torty Gallus is committed to hiring Section 3 residents and providing construction training classes. Studio 27 Architecture has committed to also hire an office assistant clerk, as well as AMAR Group has committed to hire and train unemployed residents and commit to a 3% goal for non-construction contract services.
Okay. Thank you very much. Aquarius, are you asking additional questions? If you are, you're on mute.
I want to say this real quick with Torty Gallus that also did our Hope 6. So I'm looking at what happened with Hope 6, that we don't want the same mistakes. And I believe Deborah would be a person that would be more affiliated in tweeting some of those mistakes out, because during the time of our organization, Public Housing United, Deborah was one of the main persons that had to deal with all of the developers of the Hope 6. So I would feel comfortable with, if that is the company that you're going with, that somehow or another the Deborah is working with a group that is tweeting out all the mistakes that were made in our ward. That's the recommendation I'm just saying, and I'm going to throw that out for the minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Van Gosser. Next, Commissioner Slover, I was calling you earlier. You can ask your questions.
Sure, I appreciate it. I just want to clarify again that if the board approves this IDIQ contract, and I know you said earlier it's not $27 million, but in fact, this does authorize the spending of $27 million. that none of those contracts, no matter the size, will come back to the board, that this is that approval of this expenditure of all those contracts. They're going to be let under this.
Commissioner, yes, similar to in the way that you all authorize the job contracts for construction or legal services contracts where you award for a minimum and a maximum that may not be used. This is also following that same approach with the request based on the amount of work that OCP has presented for a minimum and a maximum with regard to these contracts. And yes, once the contracts are awarded here and you all authorize and provide approval, the contracts may be for that minimum up to that maximum, may not be to that maximum. And again, because they're task order driven, then it would be based on each task order to, again, allow and allot those amounts to actually be approved going forward based on task orders.
Okay, so just in simplicity, this is approving potentially $27 million worth of spending.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. And looking at the presentations and everything, can you explain again the difference between category A and category B? It's my understanding, let me tell you my understanding, you tell me whether I'm right or wrong, that it's purely a size and scope thing. So the category A folks are bigger and have more financial capacity, and there's additional, you said full landscape plans and AE and design services. So it's just like a bigger firm with more capacity. You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yes, that's correct, Commissioner Slover. We asked for a larger suite of services for Category A, and then we did for Category B, which then and firms had, and then the firms selected for Category A that, as a result, have larger capacity to deliver those additional services without needing external subs.
So, in following that logic, why would the firm that scored the highest in Category A score 6th in Category B?
Well, so they did not submit the same proposals for Category A and for Category B. So the firm might have not submitted as good of a proposal for Category B. I was not an evaluator, so I can't speak to my exact experience, but there were different proposals submitted for Category A and B for the same firm.
And I would also add that there were also 2 different panels. So again, not being on the evaluation panel, really can't speak to what, as Mr. Nelson said, they had to submit different proposals, so it could have been on a different level, as well as the fact that there were different panels for Category A and Category B, with a registered architect though being on each panel.
Okay, but you can see why that would stand off the page, right?
I can see how I can raise a question, yes.
Yeah. And one of the requirements was for the firms to have been in business for 5 years. Was that one of the requirements?
I believe I'm not having an RFP for it. It was 5 years of experience in multifamily design, I believe.
Well, the actual language says a responding firm must be an architectural firm licensed in the District of Columbia to have a minimum of 5 years of experience designing, leading multifamily residential construction. So the company has to have been in business for 5 years.
No, the lead principal of the firm could have been at a different firm, being a project principal, leading multifamily design. So it wasn't, so.
That's not what it says. That's not what it says. It says the firm.
Right. Basically that qualification was to ensure that we're having only experienced firms bidding, that we're not having inexperienced firms just throwing in their hat into the evaluation ring.
And so I think you'll have the same answer for the next concern, which is the 5 representative projects. They don't have to be done by the firm either?
It's the experience of the individuals, the principal, the designer, the project managers, that in terms of the for the projects that were presented.
Don't you think it's important for the firm to be able to have shown the ability to perform, not just the individuals? In other words, I could take 5 people who've never worked together. They could have the greatest credentials in the world, but they still may not be able to deliver the project on time, do all the reporting, and do all the things. And so part of what you're hiring, let me finish. Part of what you're hiring is a company and the ability for the company to perform, not necessarily the individuals. And so when I read the RFP, that's what I thought you were trying to get to with these requirements.
Could I jump in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
This is Alex. Alex Morris, Chief of Planning, Design, and Construction. So, Commissioner Slover, I think you are correct that it is a combination. I would say it's a combination of the individual experience of the team members that submitted their resumes and the firm. But as with any professional consulting organization, the value, is really just as much held within the individuals as it is within the firm itself. If a principal who has a vast experience in affordable housing leaves a firm and there's no person to take over that role, that firm may have that portfolio that existed before that person left, but they wouldn't be considered to have the same level of experience as a firm who brought that new person on board and now has the benefit of that principal's experience. So I think it really is a combination of both.
And then in addition, the scoring criteria also included a management plan, which will get at your concerns, Mr. Silver, about how does the team show that they can work well together, have performance, how will they manage the delivery of the product, how do they manage sub-consultants, do they have established relationships to show success in that matter that they could provide through references.
Well, without benefit of having seen that, I obviously can't respond to it. But, based on the RFP and based on a little bit of research I was able to do, I have concerns about this process and the awards. So I will not be able to support the resolution, given the amount of money that we're approving.
Thank you, Commissioner Silver. Commissioner Council.
Good afternoon, all. To hear all the logistics that we're going through with these agencies that actually are putting their bids in for us to pick one, I'm looking at the history. Some have done things in Washington, but their buildings look like a skyscraper. We're building communities. So I'm asking those persons or companies that are asking for to be chosen, are there any work that they have done for communities, not skyscrapers? These buildings look like they're 3, 4, 10 stories high. And we have communities, so you're getting ready to change. One for fact, Berry Farms is one. You're taking 444 units and you're bringing it back. You're bringing back, 12 to 14 or 16 units. And you don't even have a underground parking for the seniors to be able to be cared for. It's about a design with our clients in mind, which are our constituents. It's not what we're trying to make a mainstream, but we want to make sure that we're giving the community something brand new, creative, and something that they'll be glad to live in, but not a skyscraper. So do any of these agencies or companies have a community base that they have built and not skyscrapers?
Or when you respond, if
All
you
right,
can
Alex.
speak to the projects.
Santa, why don't you respond?
Oh, sorry. So with regards to the projects that these will be addressing, I know Thor had accentuated the 9 or 10 were the largest ones, which are existing senior buildings that will be rehabilitated. So, I mean, that's where the large focus of this work is going to be. So, Thor, if you want to throw up that slide so you can speak to Commissioner Council's concern there, because we're talking about the modernization and rehabilitation of existing buildings primarily.
And while we're on that, before the slide comes up, I'd just like to, this is Alex Morris again, I'd like to point out that several of the firms, including Amar, Brazier, A&E Collective, and Torty Gallus, have worked with us before, and they have done projects of multiple scales, including small townhouse developments and walk-up apartment building complexes, not just in District of Columbia, but in some cases all over the country. Torty Gallus is an industry leader nationally on Hope 6 and Choice Neighborhoods. They do affordable housing all over the place. And the district-based businesses or the local businesses like Brazier, Amar, and A&E have done work for us. And you'll know the places, you know, that they've worked on. I mean, Brazier's currently working on Langston Additions. Studio 27 is currently working. Sorry, there may be a.
So I just wanted Thor to respond so we can have the other commissioners' questions, but I appreciate that context.
Yeah, so as Mr. Sankran and Mr. Morris were presenting, the focus of the work is rehabilitation projects of which many of our senior buildings, so these are 8 to 9 story buildings, multifamily structures, where we want to really take them from public housing to an enhanced living experience for our residents. And so we want architects that have experience working in these large building formats and creating high amenity resident environments that have innovative design features. In terms of the creation of community, I think that was very much on our mind, Commissioner Council, and that was where I think we used the word design innovation to say how do we create buildings which speak to the residents in both their aesthetics and their sense of place. So.
And Thor, can you speak to how this contrasts with some of the redevelopment projects such as Berry Farm, the Commissioner Council was saying, and how that they would not be drawn off of this bench?
Right.
So, since you have the floor, could you do it?
Yeah.
Sure.
The
only reason I threw it to Thor is because he's much more, he has a deeper knowledge of this personally. But with regards to the redevelopment projects, especially like ones where we're working with a development partner, that is a process by which they we either jointly or depending on how some of these older deals are structured, in which they have proposed as part of their proposal a architect or engineering firm that they'd be working with that we would then vet, and they are then procuring. So this is a very different process from what Thor has just been describing.
Was that design shared within community engagement with each site that you all have spoken to? Do they know? Have you shown them pictures of what the finish would look like instead of showing them these high rises?
I mean, for the redevelopment projects, very much so. Those are all done through the engagement process, as we go through the redevelopment, whether it be pre-selection, post-selection, and then engagement through the redevelopment process. For these,
and what was your response? What was your response with each site?
It'll vary site to site. I mean, and some of it is ongoing, right? Because it's designed on a building by building basis as well. Like, so for some of the engagement for Berry Farm for the first phase, versus like, a different project at Greenleaf where we're talking more, right now, we're not at a building by building design phase. We're, more still on a master planning phase. So they're all in various elements of design. And but with specifically to this contract that we're seeking, this IDIQ bench that we're seeking to staff, it is for not that type of work. It is primarily for rehabilitation work on the buildings that Thor was discussing.
Thor, could you take down your slide?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right.
Ken, any more questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead,
Alex,
Commissioner Talafaro.
this is for Alex. Alex, I'm going to go back what Council was saying about Berry Farms. How in the world y'all going to build on Berry Farms? There's nowhere for nobody to park. Explain
I'd
this
like
to
to
me,
try to-
because I don't understand why y'all gonna build something and people that live there don't got no place to park.
Commissioner Talaferro, what I would like to try to do is separate the issue of Berry Farm from the issue of this AE bench, which has nothing whatsoever to do with Berry Farm.
I understand that, but the question
Yeah.
is, how y'all gonna build something that is not helping the residents?
Alex,
Can't
can you just
respond to
speak to the park, or whoever?
Sure.
Can you speak to the parking needs at Berry Farm and how it's going to be met?
They don't got no burden parking today. I saw the whole diagram. I don't see no parking lot, no parking, nothing. So do you telling me people gonna be scrambling for parking spaces?
I think that would be best answered by someone who's working on the Berry Farm project, not me. I defer.
I asked you, Alex. Then I asked Alex to give me a call yesterday. I never received.
Sir, I'm sorry. I was working until well after 7:30 last night. I did not have time to call you. If you'd like me to talk to you today, I will. Okay?
Then I got another question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not finished. And
Go ahead.
I don't have specific information about Berry Farm, so if you'd like that question answered, I would recommend you have a staff person who knows the project. Thank you.
Commissioner Talaferro, what I would welcome is maybe, who Andre and I are happy to speak with you, and then, as part of the conversations, even with our development partner, as to how parking will be addressed. Each of the buildings have requirements in which the, minimum parking requirements which have to be met as well, and how the parking will be served throughout the development. And, but what I think you're alluding to is that, you don't see surface parking on lots for a lot of these buildings, and that is correct, because as we move forward, as a city, in order to meet our the broader goals, development goals of the city, we have to ensure that we're approaching land use policies in the right way. And
you telling me so you telling me that y'all got no concern about the parking, about the issue y'all gonna? That's an issue. That's an issue y'all gonna have in the future.
So, Commissioner Talaferro, this is Neil. So I know there is parking contemplated, underground parking specifically. I'm going to ask Central to talk with you offline and how that's being apportioned throughout the development.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Strickland?
I got one more, Mr.
No, go ahead.
Chair.
Go ahead, Antonio. Sorry about that.
Y'all got to help to support the residents when we do our tours. Because the only person been going is me and Aquarius. As the commissioners, we all should be sitting down face to face with the residents of DCHA. It's not right that the only person to come. It's not right. The only person to come to the tours is me and Aquarius. Sometimes you, Neil, but everybody else strictly came covered one time. But still, y'all got to think about the residents. That's what my concern is. And y'all, I don't see it. Y'all concerned about them.
And Commissioner Talaferro has expressed that concern to me earlier. As you know, we've been organizing tours of the various properties for commissioners just to experience firsthand the issues that are being faced. I'm going to encourage people as much as their schedules could allow, would allow to participate in those tours.
So can I make a comment on that, Neil? Some people like myself do our own tours because you actually see reality sometimes a little clearer that way. So I got a lot of pictures I'd be glad to share with you.
Yeah, no, I know a lot of commissioners do their own tours, so I appreciate that.
Plenty of these properties, I've seen plenty of our circumstances. So just because people don't show up to the predetermined tours doesn't mean people aren't at properties.
Good point, Commissioner. Okay, so let's move on. Thanks, Commissioner Talaferro. Lawan?
I second that with Commissioner Slover. I know, like Greg and many of you have seen me in meetings and meeting with residents all over. So I'm sorry, Commissioner Talaferro, if those timing for those tours don't fit into some of our schedules, but best believe we are engaging with the community as often as we can. But my questions are comments. First, I would like to make the first comment I just wanted to thank the team, Cinto and Thor, and I've had conversations with the chair, Albert, also with Commissioner Slover, on just trying to make sure that we keep our meetings as open as possible. And we were just trying to do to play around with that in the ops meeting. And we were able just, Thor and Cinto both accommodate as well by splitting the presentation where the entire meeting didn't have to be closed. So the public could see the recorded meeting and just look at and hear the discourse and questions that we had, even though it wasn't in real time, which we're working on for the next ops meeting, hopefully, Mr. Mays, that we can live stream in real time. But I do think it was a big step forward, and I think that I just mentioned the chair and Commissioner Slover, but I know other commissioners feel the same about having our meetings more open as possible whenever the opportunity allows us to. But going on to the actual contract itself, I know that there's a lot of projects coming down, and I do think that this is probably one of the best vehicles in order to get these. I know that the number of 27 million, but each one of these are capped at 3.75 million, I do believe. But I do think that with all of the projects that are in the hopper, I do think that this is probably one of the best ways in order to attack this. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I do think this is one of the best ways right now. And I do like to see all of the CBE businesses that participated in that. I know that is something that a few of us on the board spend a lot of time talking about, is that we want local participation as much as possible. But as Commissioner Slover points out sometimes, but it's not in conflict with the quality of the work that these firms are able to do. And Thor, my question is, can you talk about some of the quality of these firms, even though they are CBEs, and I don't look at that as a bad thing, but the quality of these firms as you see them, the ones that you guys selected?
Sure. So we're very excited with the way the evaluation scoring came out, because it represents both a diverse group of different firms that have different experiences. So like we were mentioning, Tortigalis is a national leader in Hope 6 master planning and low-rise design, as well as multifamily construction in the district. To Studio 27, which is an innovative design firm creating very thoughtful, supportive housing structures for the most needy individuals in our city. And then to firms that are cutting-edge multifamily design firms like Studios Architecture and Moya Design Partners, who are creating buildings that are, advancing what residential amenities look like in buildings, what's the experience of living in housing. So we can bring this expertise to I'm going to say, just transformation of public housing into supportive environments. So, in terms of, we use GSA selection criteria. I mean, a lot of the questions have been around how did this selection work. This is a new selection process for the district, which follows best practice standards of design excellence modeled by GSA and we hope that we can get the same level of architectural excellence using this contracting process here at the Housing Authority.
LaJuana, any further questions? Great. Jose Ortiz?
Okay, I've got one.
No, not you yet. We're asking commissioners questions. Commissioner Jose Ortiz. Let me come back to Jose. Commissioner Hoffman, any questions from you?
No questions.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bussey Reeder.
I'm on my apologies.
Go ahead, Jose.
Okay. All right. Hey, thank you for great presentation. I want to ask, what's the process if we vote for this, and what's the process once this is how is that process after the house chosen, and what deals are they attached to? Like how
I didn't get. So I didn't catch all your
the,
question. You broke up.
the task orders. How are they proposed in the IDIQ of this matter?
Sure. So we
in the
still
selection process?
Sure. So what if once we have a contracting bench awarded, we still like to use competitive bidding when possible to ensure we get the best product and the best service delivery. So we would within the ask for a task from multiple different. Basically, we create a scope of work similar to an RFP, but then it's sent out as a task to the contractors, and then we get bids back based on how they think they could do the work and then their pricing. And then we would select, one of the bidders to go forward and develop architectural drawings. In terms of the construction process, we use this as to scope the project. So we would, having a lot of this work would go towards kind of what I call the first third of the design process, getting the concepts, feasibility study, getting zoning and building code issues figured out, creating what we call a schematic design set, and then we might put that out to bid to a contractor to get pricing. And then we might also have construction administration on this contract over a contractor to ensure that they're building to design drawings prepared by an architect.
Jose, you're breaking up, but does that answer your question?
Where it's just more for the public and just for an understanding of how this money regarding a process, they go into a competitive process within the IDIQ. What contracts are there attached to? Like example,
sure. So
the job contracting, so that we already have existing contracts that this will be attached to. How would that be?
So as I was mentioning, if this is a contract financed through district capital funds, we would advance the a bid set. So it'd be the documents to send out to a contractor using this IDIQ contract, and then submit it to a separate contractor to actually build the rehabilitation. If we're looking at finance being through RAD, we might just have this move to, say, the feasibility stage, where we're understanding the pricing of the job and we're understanding the scope of services, and then an architect with a contractor might come aboard to deliver the project. That would be separately contracted and brought back to this board. So there's a variety of different what we call contracting vehicles that we'll use, and this gives us flexibility to use different delivery systems to achieve speed, quality, and budget.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jose. Dion? All right, let me go to John. Questions from you?
Questions?
Mr. Falchek?
Oh, okay. No, I thought I heard Dion. Sorry. No, I was just gonna thank the team for the work on it. I guess the question kind of hinges, and I don't know if this is for Thor or Alex, but kind of the resident engagement. Once we're not greenlighting these projects to start or go forward, this will actually enable us to really engage residents in the way that they'll understand what they want to see in the design at these properties. So can you talk a little bit about that just to emphasize that a bit?
Sure. I mean, so from a portfolio aspect, the projects we're pursuing and these are all things that we plan. I've presented several times to you about the projects that we would like to tee up for RAD and capital rehabilitation. So we work with you as the board to identify these projects, and then we put them in budgets that we submit to the council and to the mayor. So so in terms of what projects will be done and what the services are, that is, we developed that with you. Was there something?
Or if I can jump in here,
yeah.
And I think Commissioner, this is where I think you were headed, is that whenever we then work with the, like say, for example, if we were doing a RAD project where we engage with the community through that, and part of it is the visioning phase up front, but then as we continue to go through, it is these partners that are helping us design the ultimate improvements. And it'll be through that engagement process, we'll be able to get feedback from the residents themselves as to the improvements that they want to be able to see as the project is being developed.
And then I think, Thor, during your presentation, you listed out sort of what we thought the design amounts would be for each particular property. So the notion that these are actually going to be all maxed out and utilized to their full capacity doesn't align with.
No, I don't think we're going to expend the full contract allowance of every contractor. As I was mentioning, one of the goals for creating the high amount fee contractor was to allow for competitive bidding throughout that 3-year period. So while one contractor or two more contractors may get to that threshold, I expect many others won't, because we're trying to have more contract allowance than we think we have pipeline.
Okay, just wanted to be clear about kind of what we thought the need was going to be in terms of the dollar amounts that we'd actually be spending on these.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we expect the dollar amount of the services to be about 21 million or over, and so that's why we're asking for the higher amount of contracting authority.
In order to preserve a greater level of competitiveness in each individual task order.
Right, because that allows you then to compete it, get best price, and then move forward expeditiously.
Right. Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome. So before we call for a vote, I am going to just make a few comments. First of all, I want to thank Lawan for setting aside a new standard in his committee for transparency, hoping that that's something we could replicate on all of our committees. I also want to thank Director Garrett, Laurie Bonds, Senthil Sankaran, Thor, and all the others that are moving us into the 21st century of procurement. GSA, Department of General Services, DC Public Libraries, many other New York City government all embrace IDIQ contracts as a way of, one, getting competition, two, moving projects swiftly. And so I wanted to just, for the record, commend you guys for expanding your approach to this kind of delivery from just your legal services to now your construction services. One of the questions, the only question that I have, Commissioner Falchecchio asked, and that was about community engagements around some of these projects. Part of your Group A selection, or part of the reasoning you give in the Group A selection was not just the architectural services, but planning services. So if you can talk a little bit about sort of what that differentiator means, high level and on projects.
So planning services are both what we think of as the public engagement, the facilitation, the master planning, but it's also, working through administrative processes in the city to get approvals with DDOT and the Office of Planning that might be more entitlement, or the Office of Zoning that are not building permit related, but are entitlements. And then working at that concept level for planning a project and thinking about how to reposition it at a larger scale. So like looking at not just the physical needs of a building, but thinking about at a larger scale, how can we change the experience of this building? Like thinking about programming and amenities that we can plan into the building before we start putting pencil to paper and designing things.
Thanks so much, Thor. Billy wanted to ask another question.
Yeah, just as a final thing I forgot to ask before, in the RFP, there's a section about conflicts of interest, and that to the extent the respondent affirms that there's no conflicts of interest, and if there are, that they would disclose them in the proposal. Do you know if anybody's submitted any conflicts?
Ms. Bonds?
No, not to my knowledge, Commissioner Slover.
All right, thank you.
Great. So thanks everyone for your questions. So
One last question, Mr. Chair. And my last question is whether or not when we are vetting these companies, do we check them out with their business standards? Do we actually check out and see how many lawsuits they already have? Have there been any discrimination, employment, or any of the above? While we're not being discriminatory, but to me, it would be a part of the investigation perspective to make sure that we're in compliance and meeting the standard in which the Housing Authority mission is about. Standard employees. Do we do a check on them? I just want to know, do we check on how many lawsuits they have in the District of Columbia Court? I just want to know.
Commissioner,
Laura,
we don't.
can you answer that question?
Yes, we don't check to see whether there are any pending lawsuits. We do check to find out whether the district has barred them or their principals from actually doing business in the district because of any poor practices or illegal activities. We also check the federal government to make sure that they are still in good standing and can be able to perform. But we don't do it to find out whether anyone has sued someone, because again, until the lawsuit is done, it doesn't mean just because someone has been sued that there has been any ill means or any bad activity, because as you know, people get sued all the time. Doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. But again, if those things rise to a level where they need to be barred from doing business, then that is what we look to. And that is what we make determinations on as well as past performance with us as a housing authority.
And then 30 points are dedicated towards references from past clients.
You're welcome.
Got it. All right, so we got to move ahead. Thanks everyone for that. So this time I'm going to entertain a motion to approve resolution 2106, which will authorize the execution of contracts for professional architectural and engineering services. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Motion.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded a motion. Ms. McNair, can you do a roll call vote?
Thank you. Commissioner Falchecchio?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoffman?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Ortiz-Goud?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Council?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Strickland? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Commissioner Strickland. Thank you. Commissioner Talaferro?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Commissioner Van Gastri? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Commissioner Van Gastri.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. What is your vote?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Bessie Reeder?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Bill Slover?
No.
Thank you. Chairman Albert?
Yes.
Thank you. Chairman, you have 7 yes, 3 no. The resolution is approved.
Thank you. So let's move on to our next resolution, which is Resolution 2108, again, which will authorize.
Pardon me, Deborah Frazier. I had a question. Lots of questions didn't get answered. For time's sake, I'll put this one forward. What is the time period for all these contracts? I heard initially that this was to cover up to a 10-year period of development and redevelopment.
Let's get the answer to the
years.
question. Ms. Fraser, let's get the answer. Quickly answer that question.
3 years.
Did you say 3 years? Got it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Ms. Fraser. So again, we're going to examine Resolution 2108, which would authorize a RAD application for Potomac Gardens Senior and 700 mid-rise apartments. And I'm going to again turn it over to Mr. Sankaran and his team.
Simple.
Unless you guys want me to do it.
No.
Oh, so
Commissioner,
quickly you responded.
Chairman Albert, this is Alex Morris, Chief of Planning, Design, and Construction. I think I'm doing 2108 if that's the next thing on the agenda.
Yeah, that's what's on the agenda, yes.
Great. Okay, I'll do that.
Is the executive director gone? Is that what I'm understanding?
The executive director asked to be excused from the meeting earlier. You may have missed that.
I didn't know I didn't realize he was excusing himself for the entirety of the rest of the meeting.
Apparently, but the show goes on.
Bad, just further.
Alex, continue.
Yes, sir. Okay, so this presentation is to cover the proposed conversion of Potomac Gardens Senior and Family Mid-Rise to RAD. And I'll go through the presentation as quickly as I can. I know it's a bit lengthier than Thor's, so I'll try to reduce as necessary. If you want me to skip ahead, please just say so. We have 4 items on the agenda to discuss. One of them is why RAD. The second is our conformance with resolutions 1901 and 0433.
So Alex, you can skip
Sure.
over why RAD. We discuss it at every RAD.
Perfect.
Okay, so just get into the resolution, etc.
I'm happy to do that. Yes, thank you. Number 3 is our resident engagement on this process, and number 4 is the pro forma of the deal or the structure of the financial transaction. So I'll skip over why RAD. We are in conformance, we believe, with the provisions of resolutions both 1901 and 0433 as passed by the Board of Commissioners. And just in general, what I'll say about the project, I don't maybe want to read this whole thing. It's in diligent and it's available. Is that we are planning to use RAD on the Potomac Gardens Senior and Family Mid-Rise projects because they represent projects that have significant physical needs. Although they are not part of the original 14 most urgent properties in our transformation plan, they do need core upgrades to fire sprinkler systems, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and energy efficiency. And the preliminary deal pro forma or the financial pro forma demonstrates that the RAD conversion and the associated rehab can reduce operating costs and allow Potomac Gardens Senior and Family Mid-Rise to be self-sustaining. We've also developed a relocation strategy that is based upon resident choice, and it involves a combination of units within the 2 buildings, within the senior building and the 700 building, as well as other locations in the neighborhood, for example, Kentucky Courts and Hopkins Apartments. The reason we chose to do that here and not just simply keep everybody in the building is that when we engaged in the work at Judiciary House and LaDroit Senior, we did learn that some people, in hindsight, because construction work in a building where you're currently living is disruptive and noisy, said if I'd known that, I would have asked to transfer. So we're making other units available in the neighborhood that are well within the neighborhood of Potomac Gardens, and people all have the ability to come back. They have the right to return upon the completion of the work after the RAD conversion. We are going to maintain the ownership of the property under the ground at Potomac Gardens Senior and Potomac Gardens 700 Family. We're going to supplement our internal staff capacity in this instance by proposing to work with a fee development partner to scope the project and develop the financial model, help us get commitments of equity and debt to support the construction and then support us through the construction activities. We're proposing this in order to better leverage our staff internally and provide ourselves with the best expertise and the ability to facilitate hitting all of our critical milestones. Post-RAD conversion, the property will contain the exact same number of units and the same mix of units as the pre-conversion status of the 2 properties, and all of the units will continue to be affordable to residents earning between 0 and 30% of our area median income. The deal is, prioritized because of the conditions that we found in the building, in the 2 buildings. The buildings were built in the 1960s, have not been substantially renovated since then, and there are latent issues, as I mentioned, in the electrical, plumbing, sanitary, and HVAC systems, as well as fire sprinkler systems that were compliant with code in the 1960s but are no longer in compliance. And in A building such as this, if you don't touch it, you can keep it as what they call grandfathered, but it's not really a very prudent thing. And it's been 60 years, and we need to bring it up to full compliance with 2021 code. We are planning to self-manage Potomac Gardens Senior and Family 700 post-RAD conversion. So DCHA will be the management entity. And we will ensure to the greatest extent legally allowable that no conversion will result in the diminution of any material rights or protections for residents. That includes the guaranteed right to return, no resident rescreening, compensation for all related expenses to relocation, including any utility charges or any extraneous charges that residents incur through the relocation process, full funding of the resident councils, just like public housing, post-conversion. The rent will be calculated based upon 30% of adjusted gross income, just as it is in public housing. And utilities will continue to be in the rent calculation. There will be no additional charges for heat or electric or water. All the utility charges will be in the rent, just as they are today. We also fully conform with, we checked both resolutions 1901 and 0433, and in all cases where both apply, we apply with both, we conform with both, and in the case where there's a conflict, as in provision 11 of 1901, resolution 1901 controls. We've had a fairly robust engagement strategy with Potomac Gardens, starting with the issuance of our resident information notice in August of 2020. We've had pairs of meetings for both the senior and 700 buildings starting in August of 2020. We had a follow-up set of meetings in September of 2020, and then we've had more recent meetings with residents to re-engage and make sure to refresh the conversation and make sure that our residents understand what we're proposing. Those meetings occurred on May 18th and June 8th of this year. So June 8th was yesterday. So we just had a meeting with the seniors and the Family 700 building residents yesterday at 3 and 4 p.m. This is just an image to show what the proposed renovations could look like. This is not the design, but this is an image of the vision for what we hope to bring these buildings up to. And the vision really is about bringing the apartments up to a full standard of modern living, enhancing amenities in the buildings, providing more services, and more of what Thor referred to before as a more wraparound model of senior living, very related to our AE bench. And the exterior rendering at the bottom right shows what the exterior public spaces could look like with new plantings, refreshed surfaces, better seating, and just generally sort of better conditions. Once again, RAD resident protections and engagement. RAD can fund the major building improvements of this project, stabilize federal funding for the future with no resident displacement, no loss of housing benefits, and no change in the rent calculation. And we're going to engage with residents after we apply for the CHAP, and we're going to hire an architect to work with us to do that resident engagement, to talk about enhancements to the amenities in the buildings, including fitness room, health clinic, improvements to outdoor spaces and amenities, enhancing the community meeting space, providing more indoor recreation space, and providing opportunities for resident businesses within both of the buildings. Could be a convenience store, could be a beauty salon, could be both. So that's our general vision going forward. And now finally, how do we pay for all of that? So the pro forma really talks about where we are today. So if you look at the chart on the slide, you will see, number one, that we have something that says PH right next to where it says Potomac Gardens. That's our current audited financials for fiscal year 20. And you'll see that our revenue is just over $1.1 million for the building, but our cost to operate is 2.6. And that leads to a net operating income deficit of almost $1.5 million, which once we take out debt service, we can't afford to do any kind of work because our net cash flow would be $1.6 million to the red. Then in the RAD conversion, we looked at a straight RAD conversion, which is the conversion from public housing to project-based vouchers. If you look at the net cash flow, when we take out capital reserves, debt service, and deferred developer fees, we still are in the red to the tune of $380,000. So it still doesn't actually work. But with the new flexibilities provided by HUD through RAD Section 18 blends, we are able at this point now to fund a project with a revenue stream annually of $3.6 million and net total expenses of $2.5 million, yielding us a net operating income of $1.1 million per year projected. And that allows us to put away capital replacement reserves for any equipment that breaks down in the period of operation. It covers our debt service on the debt we carry of $727,000. And it allows us to pay our fee developer his deferred developer fee on an annual basis to the tune of $175,000 and keep a net cash flow, which is essentially our portion of the deferred fee, of an annual number of almost $117,000 in net cash flow per year. So we've turned the building from a negative cash flow to positive cash flow, which is very important. One other thing I'll point out is resident services is a line item that we currently don't fund as a separate line item in public housing, but under RED Section 18 blend, we can afford to spend almost $60,000 a year in targeted resident services. These are not just the ORS services that are provided to everybody, but it's actually additional money that we can use to fund services specific to the residents at the senior building and the 700 family building. So this is a new way of budgeting that will allow us to create line item budgets for the building itself where we can afford to enhance services. Finally, there was a question in the DevMod committee meeting about how the RAD and RAD Section 18 numbers were calculated. They're basically calculated based upon the bedroom mix of the two buildings, and this is the number of 1 and 2 bedroom units in the two buildings, the total monthly rent subsidy that's available, and then the total annual rent is calculated at the right, leading to a net total income of $2.658 million under RAD and a net income of $3.6 million under RAD Section 18, which does correspond to these two numbers on the prior slide. And then finally, we provided a deal template. This is an excerpt from the deal template, but it shows that the project is funded by means of estimated low-income housing tax credit equity of 4% tax credits to the tune of almost $35.7 million, a permanent loan of $13.5 million, a seller note, which is basically our selling our building to an entity we set up. This is a paper transaction, $35.6 million, and then a deferred developer fee, which is basically taking a portion of the development fee and putting it back into the project to make the deal balance, and then we pay ourselves back over time. That's where that $175,000 and $116,000 shows up in the pro forma. So the total sources of the project are $87.6 million, and the total uses match up $87.6 million. So, and it shows the uses of the funds, the acquisition costs. The hard costs are basically the cost of construction. We're estimating at $30.2 million to renovate the two buildings. Soft costs include all the legal fees and architectural and engineering fees. And then the developer fee that's paid at the closing is $7.5 million, of which, I'm sorry, that's the total fee, but then a portion of it is deferred to make the deal balance, which is pretty typical in a deal such as this. If there are any more specific questions than that related to finance, we have our person who modeled this. I'm not the person that does the finance, so we can have Mr. Cerna come on in a minute and talk about that. That's our presentation. Thank you very much for hearing me out, and sorry for the length, but there were a lot of points that I wanted to get across. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. As usual, I'm going to turn to my colleagues for a round of question, and so let's start with how you appear on my screen. Commissioner Council, any questions from you?
Oh, they were self-explanatory and brown bag.
Great. Commissioner Slover, questions from you?
I'm going to take a pass, but I do have questions. I'm just not ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Aquarius, Mr. Von Gosling.
I would.
You're mute. You're mute now.
Wait a minute, Commissioner Albert. I want to go on the record saying this with this RAD, that I've used integrity, I've used character, and just with it. It is being placed in front of this board today with some of the integrity that nobody else have ever addressed. So I'm telling you now, Neil, I'm being quiet on this. I'm going to allow the commissioners to talk. And if any of my enemies my challenger or opposers have anything to say with this RAD, I will not be muted. And I am in my best professional manner today. I have studied this RAD, and I'm the only commissioner on this board that received a certification in RAD before any other commissioner. I've been studying RAD since 2012, and I'm not going to be undermined, played any games by organizers, advocates, or none of the above. One thing you know I have said as the president of Potomac Gardens, it's an insult if I have an organizer in here, and if our residents are living in deplorable conditions and taught by Paul Battle, and you don't go to landlord and tenant court and pay your rent to the court, we're not hearing today about maintenance problems. Because if Wynn is our organizer, they better be having residents pay their rent to the court register and make us a model. There's no reason for this RAD not to go through when I've been on this board and the DCHA board, and I'm not ashamed to say I was trained by Larry Dwight. I'm proud of it. He taught me how to make a deal. He taught me how to read. And I cried. And believe me, it wasn't fun learning from him. It was miserable. But guess what? In my single member district, is nobody, and I want them to challenge me. Nobody know my ward like I know it. Nobody know Potomac Gardens like I know it, because first and foremost, Melvina Middleton, Jacqueline West, and Martha Queen taught me well. And unlike anybody else, I'm not intimidated by competition, challenges, or any of the above. I give any and everybody their respect according to your skill set. So the first thing we need to find out is whether or not Wynn is our organizer, because I've always told you that. But I don't know that for a fact when I reached out to them. Because if they not, I'm going with the Center for Community Change. Because we need organizers in this incident. Potomac 700 and the senior building would not have allowed for what you call King Council in my ward, and you're absolutely correct. My ward is only about skyscrapers, as you say. Because first of all, you have to know the density and the geographic and the urban studies of this ward. I wasn't taught by the Urban Institute and Howard as a joke deal, and I'm not joking now. So what I'm going to do is end this, and if I want to take up for this RAD, all I need you to do is give me a cue when to shut up and when to be quiet. And I ain't trying to be Maxine Waters. And I'm not a Kimmy Gray. I am an Aquarius Von Goss Reed, who was taught by Paul Battle, Washington Inner City Self-Help, and Edgar Kahn. That's the face you see here today. And I'm serious.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So get it moving.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Talaferro, any questions from you? Let's go to Commissioner Falchecchio. And again, if you're not speaking, please mute your devices.
The TV's been going on for some time now.
Yeah, Shanita and Alicia, could you guys figure out what's going on and mute that device? Thank you.
Yes.
No, I was just going to thank Commissioner Van Gossery for her leadership on this, because I know that she's been working with the team members to get us where we are today. So I think just for Alex, I wanted to ask, because I saw you were going to add some community amenities. How do we do that too without like losing unit space? Can you tell us how to do that? Not specifically for this, but just in general, sort of how does that work and how do we take that into consideration?
Yeah, so in a lot of, thank you, Commissioner. So in general, in a lot of our buildings, we have ground floor spaces around the lobby or public areas that are either oversized or underutilized for their purpose. So if there's a storage room or something that's currently locked and unavailable, if through the process of hiring an architect and working with the residents, we discover that we can accommodate some things, we're gonna challenge the architectural consultant to work with us to figure out how to get those kinds of amenities into the building, fitness room, resident businesses like a convenience store or beauty salon. We think we can do it. There are no residential units, by the way, on either of those two buildings at the ground level. Those buildings have like a raised ground floor, like a lobby area. So we believe that there is adequate space to accommodate at least some of that in the ground floors.
And then, the district has this commitment to really making our buildings more efficient. So does this also allow us to achieve kind of the standards in the building energy performance standards?
Absolutely. These buildings, these two buildings are performing about the way you'd expect a 1966 building to perform from an energy standpoint, and that's hurting us in our benchmarking with BEPS. So when we do this renovation work, we can bring this building up to current code and we can go beyond it. And we're going to look at what the cost of that would be, but we actually think that in some cases we should be doing best practice models of going beyond energy efficiency minimum standards for 2021. And we're going to look and see if we can do that as part of this. I'm not sure that we can do it. We're going to look at it and see if whether it's feasible within the amount of money we've budgeted.
Okay. And just for everybody, BEPS is building energy performance standard. And that's a goal to make all of our buildings green and energy efficient. So for this, I'm sure we haven't gotten this far into it, but are we able to kind of upgrade lighting and windows and maybe even solar if possible?
Yes, we are. And we do have a solar array on the roof of the family building and a portion of the senior building roof as well. They already exist. I believe they were, I want to say they were paid for with a DOEE grant, with our Solar for All grant. So that's already operating. And then beyond that, we can also do other things. So we're definitely looking at windows. Windows are a huge issue with energy performance. I'm sure that the exterior walls probably have minimal to zero insulation. So we'll fur the walls in and provide the requisite insulation that's required and air seal everything to make sure that the buildings perform at peak efficiency. And we're going to try to do that. One of the other things we've been looking at is the buildings currently have gas-fired boilers in the basement of the senior building that feed both buildings. We're looking at trying to break the buildings off of the central heating system and create electric systems to provide both heat and air conditioning throughout, so that there's central air throughout both buildings, which they currently do not have fully. So, and
no, that would be a great addition.
That would be.
And then just in terms of, you laid out that slide with the engagement, and I know Commissioner Van Gosri has kind of been asking for this to come before us for some time now. So is there a way, and this is just sort of a broader question, is there a way to get that community engagement right-sized so we get all the input that we need and get residents comfortable with it before it comes to the board without being as extended as it was? Because I think for Commissioner Van Gosri, she would have liked this to us sooner.
Yeah, we agree. I would say that, I don't want to tell on us, but I think we're learning as an agency how to do better resident engagement. I think you're watching that happen in real time. You're watching us learn and get better at it. I also think that, in the architect we hire for the conceptual study and the eventual design of the project, we're going to be looking for somebody, going back to Thor's, AE bench, we're going to be looking for somebody that's got experience with helping us develop better tools to engage and better charrette tools to help, get feedback from residents and really have a meaningful dialogue. And there are a lot of firms on that bench that I can tell you have that kind of experience, and that's really useful. We're not claiming, and I wouldn't claim I know everything about how to engage with a diverse population of residents. So I think we'll benefit from that expertise as well and learn from it.
Commissioner, for a second, this is Tony Robinson, OPAC. I think with the changes we're going to be making to the website over the next several months, that's going to help with the transparency and the interaction with the residents. And I think OPAC will be working a little more closely with OCP to step up our resident engagement. So I think we'll see a huge improvement in that area, and more transparency and more reporting out on questions and issues and their resolution.
Yeah, just to echo Tony,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I really think that the strides we've made as an agency in resident engagement have been phenomenal over the past year. From where we were to where we are now, we can still get better, and we'll work with Tony's shop to make sure we do that.
Well, and we could talk about this some other time too, but just I wonder
Sure.
if it was the resident engagement that kind of made that timeline get extended before you got to us, or if there were other factors that, you know, kind of extended it. And you don't have to answer that now, but just kind of as we think about how to do resident engagement, and then also make sure that we're fulfilling what the residents expect in terms of getting back to them, that the board is taking it. I just think it's important. And then, Chairman, my last question, Alex, just for the record, you're not watching children's cartoons while you're answering these questions, right?
I'm personally not doing that. No.
Okay, good.
No.
I just wanted to make sure
I don't know what that noise is. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's either Sentinel or Thor. They're known for watching cartoons at middle of the afternoon.
Thor has children. I don't, so that might be part of it. I don't know, but
my kids are on a separate floor, so I don't think it's that. It's not coming from me.
Okay. All right, so let's move on. Dion, anything to add?
So I was going to ask some of the similar questions, but I wanted that actually John, Commissioner Facecchio asked. But I am concerned or would like to know the resident service line item. Are we moving in a direction that will be placed in each red for each one of the properties?
Yeah, we are moving in that direction. Yes.
Because we didn't do that for Judiciary House, correct?
We did do that for Judiciary House. Yes,
we did.
We did.
Okay, I didn't
we had.
See that
I think it was. Yeah, it really. We're going to work on trying to normalize it so that it's sort of tied to each unit size. That building was a little bigger, and it was more like 70,000, I think, budgeted in that project. But we are looking to make that part of our model, that we fund enhanced resident services at each site as we go.
So would that be administered through the resident council office? How the funds are utilized?
I would say we really haven't worked that out yet.
Okay.
We're working on this as we go. I would defer a little bit to Brian Harris to help us answer that question.
Brian Harris do not have to answer that, Dion. I can answer that. If you are really interested in this board, all you need to do is to Google 24 CFR, which is HUD. Just Google HUD resident councils. That's it. Now, when it comes out, it's national. Now, what you will see what I've crafted in this raft is this particular raft, and I want anybody on this board to prove me wrong. There is no other public housing in the United States of America have a raft like this. HUD came to the Housing Authority. Greg Burns told me in my face where every commissioner, just about including council, was there, and Telefero. I crafted this red based on what he told me I could not do. He said, you can't do it like that. I said, yes, I can. First of all, I want to respect the empowerment of residents. Miss Pettaway and Miss Moore have a group. We are not the residents. We want our cut. They are not agreeing or aligned with where I'm going, and I'm not going to violate their rights. Under CFR, they have a right. I do too. I got a right to be a fool or a right to move forward. I decided to move forward because I've been a fool too long. Okay? I'm not a Kimmy Gray girl. Ask Karen Settles whether or not Kimmy would have let it happen in her community. Ask Ken Council got his head down like that. Would it happen? I'm the only commissioner that have allowed my opposition every right. Now they got the right to do what they want with 1213th and I Street. That's what they wanted. They wanted TOPA. They had meetings. I didn't interrupt their meetings. I shared it with the Housing Authority. I went to HUD and was investigated. Guess what I didn't do? Doing the others that you want them to do unto you, because I could have told HUD, investigate them like they investigated me. We both been on our resident council boards. I know Miss West leadership. I know Melvina leadership. I'm not a part of neither of their leadership. Now, if you want to know my leadership, Google this. Mildred Haley, Boston, Massachusetts, to fight back. That's
Commissioner
my
Van Gosri,
leadership.
I want to see
Okay, you're right. Because I
if
get
Ms. Reader
I get
is
very
satisfied with your
passionate with
answer.
this. You're right, and I got to respect my chair, but I get very passionate with this.
We appreciate the passion.
You're right.
Dion, any further questions?
I'm going to reach out to Commissioner Van Gosri to get a little bit more information, but I'm good. Thank you.
Please do. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I want to start off by saying, of course, we want to figure out a way to get all these buildings renovated and improved and all that. I just want that to be first and foremost, but we also have to walk through the devils in the details and make sure we know what we're getting into. So I want to break this into two pieces. One is the sort of impact of this transition on this particular property, and then the capacity of the agency to perform. So I'll start off on the impact to the property. And in the documents that you provided to us, the pro forma in particular, we had talked about this earlier. Currently, the property runs at a 75% occupancy, 70 to 75% occupancy, and a 70 to 75% collection of rents, correct?
Earlier, I think I said that there was a vacancy report that was, I think, 79% occupancy over the site, and the collection rate was at 73.
Okay.
That's, I think, what I said.
So we can see how the occupancy will jump if you do the renovation. But the collection rate is concerning because you're running the pro forma at, you said 95% collection, and we're currently at a, call it 75. So that's a 20% delta. So what happens if you don't continue to collect that 75%? I mean, what's the remedy? In other words, the housing authority no longer has the flexibility because this is owned by a single purpose entity that's got it's got a LIHTC lender, it's got its own P&L. So what remedy is available to the agency if we continue to collect the 75%?
Good question. There are people better able to answer that. I would ask if John Serra or if Alexander Cerna would like to jump in. Or Sintel.
It's not an economics number. It's a management question. It's a question of management, Alex.
Remember, I'm an architect, so I'm not a manager. But let me tell you what I think
Alex,
they are.
I'm not sure you.
Go for it.
No offense. I'm just not sure you can answer. I think it's a question of, if we don't collect the rent and the rent's not paid, what's the remedy available to the agency?
There is a remedy. One remedy which the investors may request is that we change our management structure so that we collect higher percentage of rent and that we operate at a lower cost of operation. We have to keep the income above the red line. So that's going to be an absolute under any financial transaction. So we're going to have to figure out how to maintain positive net operating income.
And I think that what needs to be noted is this would be a process where the agency is paying itself because it's under a HAB contract. So the differentiation would be, if there's anything delinquent, it would be a tenant's portion of rent. Which would be far less than 25%.
And so what's the tenant's portion of the rent in the $3.6 million scenario?
That would be based on the income of the tenant.
So generally speaking, you got to pro forma it somehow, right?
Yeah. So is there anyone on the phone that can answer that?
I'm driving to a point. Let me just drive to my point, which is that the remedy to get to the 95% collection is eviction.
I don't think it's eviction. I think once again it's the agency paying itself. So if the agency is good on doing that, then, these are subsidized units. If there's someone who doesn't pay their portion of the rent and continues not to pay, then you would be in the process of entering to some sort of repayment agreement or something prior to eviction. You want to work
Correct.
things out. We're not in the eviction business. We're in the rental.
I understand that.
Let's keep it real. This housing authority and public housing is
please, this is
zero
my
to
time.
nothing. So if the rad is craft like this and the language is saying the right thing, this is what it means. If you're on zero rent and you live in Potomac Gardens, go to a one bedroom, your rent will be zero rent. Talk the language that we
Okay, Aquarius, could we
understand.
allow Commissioner Slover to finish, and then you can make additional comments if you need
What
to.
is the 75% collection rate that we're talking about, right? Mr. Mays, the way you're describing it, the agency is not paying 25% of the rent.
I think the 75% was the pre-RAD, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, but we're paying the rent today. It's the same thing. I mean, it's like there's no fundamental difference.
The fundamental difference is the subsidy.
Commissioner Slover, I think your position is also built upon the assumption that the collections stay the same. So I think there is also an assumption on our side in terms of a higher level of performance of those collections, because it's no longer done on a portfolio level. It is restricted to this property in which, and it's critical to the performance of this property. So I think inherent to our putting this forward and us doing not just this RAD, but any RAD, it's challenging the authority to perform at a higher level as well. So, and I think that's where it goes to your assumption of whether or not we can. And so I don't know if we're going to meet your threshold.
But I guess I'm not articulating my point very well. Clearly, what this is telling me is that 25% of the current tenants of Potomac Gardens don't pay their rent. Is that wrong?
Correct.
And so to convert the RAD, those 25% of tenants will need to pay their rent, or else they will be evicted. No?
So it's also impacted by the current vacancy. So let's not reflect that as well. I mean, there's an assumption of an increased vacancy in terms of that'll increase the overall NOI for the property.
Are you suggesting that the 25% non-collection is in empty units? I mean,
No. What I was saying is NOI is also reflected, is reflective of the empty unit. So with the increased, so in terms of our ability to cover any obligations, the added, the decreased vacancy will also help offset that as well, because the collections will.
I have a Commissioner Slover.
So there's a lot of background noise, folks. If you can just please put your device on mute, and Mrs. Slover, if you can ask your question so we can get on to other commissions, I'd appreciate it. But give me one second to see if I could paraphrase what you're trying to get to by asking this question. How does DCHA intend to close the delta, the 20% delta on collection after the redevelopment has happened?
So I would really appreciate if someone from finance or operations could answer that.
So this is Larry. Good afternoon, commissioners. I think it requires us to manage differently and put different systems in place that's very different than what we do now. One of the things that we are looking at implementing is being able to collect rent on the property and process the rent on the property. I think some of the just the way we would have to manage would be extremely different, but notwithstanding that we would give every resident the same opportunities to go into a repayment agreement or what have you to avoid them being evicted.
So that's the repayment thing is what I'm talking about, because we don't have that flexibility. So in the best case scenario, we're going to have $116,000 of free flow cash. That's if everything goes perfect. So we're at a razor thin margin. So, you know, my concern, as I said last time on judiciary, is that the remedy is for DCHA to be removed as the property manager, and for the LIHTC investor to take over the asset. So I just, you know, this sort of, we're going to manage the property differently and all these things. The bottom line is you're going to have to collect 95% of the rent, and we're only collecting 75% today. So it's going to be a fundamentally, you're going to have to do something fundamentally significantly different. And I don't think it's management. So I just put that out there as a concern.
Yeah.
And so I'll move on to my next question, which is,
Thank
you
you,
know,
Will.
Okay.
Does this property currently have about $5 million of debt on it? Is that why there's a debt acquisition cost?
I didn't catch half of that question. I'm sorry. There's a lot of feedback on the line. I apologize.
There's an acquisition cost of $40 million and a seller's note of $35 million. Is that the current debt difference?
If Sasha,
Yep.
could you unmute?
That's correct. That's correct. That's the current debt that the property has, which is a CCFP and I think ESOP bonds. So that's basically we'll have to repay once we convert to red. We'll have to repay any sort of loans that are tied to the property, and that will be taken out of the the proceeds to the seller.
4.6 million of the total proceeds is going to go to pre-existing debt.
Yeah.
Good. So moving on to the capacity, I'll try to do this quickly, Neil. Parkway Overlook has been referred to as sort of the model for how we've been able to do these, to sort of point to our capacity to do these conversions, and particularly with the LIHTC lending. But it's my understanding that deal hasn't closed. It's been delayed. What were the delays? And were they possibly around this same issue that we're talking about, which is occupancy and rent collection? And were those contributory to the delay?
I don't think there's been a delay. I mean, what we have is the process of converting from the construction loan to the permanent loan. And so that has been pushed back. And the reason that's been pushed back is that there was a third-party property manager on the property that was not doing what it should have done, which is making sure that the tenants in the units had been certified to receive HAT or have HAT paid to us. So that was the issue with that. And so it's the same sort of scenario as I said before, in that this is an easier shot because HAT, when you have a building that you're managing, what you're doing is writing a check to yourself. And so that's a very basic thing that housing authorities can do and should be able to do.
Mr. May, not sure why the lawyer is asking this question, but thank you for taking a shot at that. The agency's been managing this property since November, correct?
December.
November, December. So 6 months. So we've been managing this property for 6 months. We couldn't close, and it was delayed. To say it's not delayed, I think it's inaccurate because it should have closed. Mr. Garrett had mentioned it should have closed about a month ago. Closing was delayed because they couldn't close based on our performance. Closing was delayed based on our performance, which is what I'm getting back with our capabilities. So those are my concerns. My concerns is that we don't have, I'm just trying to be honest, I don't think we have the right staff in place to tackle this thing. And Parkway Overlook is proof of that.
We also, sorry, this is Alexander Sterna. We also will need to take in consideration the pandemic and what was happening around the world and people losing jobs. So that has a great impact on our collections for, I'm sure, for Potomac as well as
And let me
So can
add
I
in
can
on.
I can I
I
can
want
I
to add in
Uh,
on
uh,
that.
Aquarius,
With
can
the
you hold on a second?
advocacy
Aquarius.
community who did not
the question
encourage
rate has
my
been
constituents to go to landlord and tenant court because they was living in deplorable conditions, as they did prior to, and Patty leads that bunch. And we know our advocacy community put DCHA to court.
Wait,
Without
so
units
time,
of deplorable
Aquarius,
Mr. Chair.
Aquarius. So can we all pause for a second? Shanita and Alicia, is there anything we can do about the incessant feedback we're getting?
So if everybody would give me 1 second, I want to mute everyone. I have ITD helping us. So just give me 1 second, please.
It's the
Okay.
constituents. It's not the board, it's the constituents.
So unfortunately, I have muted everybody.
And we're still getting
Can
the
you
feedback.
mute yourself?
Should
Give
we
me 1
all
second. 1 second. The issue is the fact, I'm sorry, the issue is the fact that we do have a ghost participant. This is not anyone that is on. So we will have to disconnect if we wanted to stop that background noise. Neil, you're
Sure.
muted. You can unmute yourself.
Can we disconnect and come back in 3 minutes and see if
We
that
sure
works?
can. Yes,
Okay,
I
so
will make
let's do
sure
that.
that everybody has called and they'll have the link as well.
Okay, great.
Thanks.